Welcome to Fantasy Football Today Dynasty. I am your host, Heath Cummings, joined today by a good friend of the program, Theo Gremminger. Has been on several times in the past. Always love the energy and the information that he brings. And he's let me know before the show that he's actually a 2026 draft class optimist, which is fantastic. We haven't had a whole lot of those on the show so far. So thank you, Theo, for coming on. Just remind everybody where they can find your work and let them know what you've been working on.
Yeah, so everything over at Fantasy Points. He's been on Dynasty Life several times. You were one of the first guests I ever had on Dynasty Life. Also, Fantasy Football Daily. That's probably the show I'm recording the most often this time of year. I also do the School of Scott with Scott Barrett, and then the 2026 NFL Draft podcast. We launched that this year. I do that with Brett Whitefield. So I'm recording quite often, and then all my Dynasty rankings, all of my written work over at fantasypoints.com. So busy time of year for us. Really fun weekend for us, Heath.
You know, it's funny. I had Alfredo on Tuesday, and he was, just won all those awards for the Pretend GM podcast. And he actually mentioned, I think I was the second guest on that show. And I always enjoy it when I have, because I know how many people have been, including you, especially you, have been generous with their time and coming on this show and helping it grow. So I always love it when I hear from people who have successful podcasts and remember that I was on early in that show. Love this community and especially watching the dynasty portion get built up. On today's show, we are going to do a 2-man rookie mock. I was trying to figure out how far do we go with this mock, because by the time we get to April, we'll be doing probably 3-round rookie mocks. We're not that crazy yet. We haven't even seen any of these guys run at the combine yet. We don't know draft capital. So what I thought was, let's do 1 round and then we'll take a break and then we'll come back and do pick 13 and pick 14. So people can kind of start thinking about, what round 2 might look like, at least the top of it. But we always start with 3 questions for our guests. And I've got a big question here at the start, so it might take a little while to answer. But what is your 10,000 foot view of the 2026 rookie class at this moment in time?
I think that a lot of the hatred for the class revolves the quarterback position. For better or for worse, Dynasty's become so super flex centric that with the lack of surefire first round quarterbacks, I think that has initially sort of set this class back. A lot of the guys in the preseason that we thought could have been top 10 picks, the Garrett Nussmeyers, the Drew Lars, those guys all had sort of bad things happen during their season to them and lost a lot of steam. Certainly, Arch Manning was a name that we were talking about a lot last summer. He's headed back to Texas. So that sort of set the class off. I'll say that I think we have a truly elite prospect in Jeremiyah Love, who really elevates the entire class, is sort of a bailout for 101 drafters. I also think we have a very strong and deep wide receiver class, and I think the NFL is going to agree with that statement. I think there's going to be a lot of wide receivers drafted early on. I think a few could go inside the top 10 overall, and I think when we get down to it, there's going to be a number of them inside of the first round. I think we have a deep tight end class, a number of guys who project to be potential NFL starters, and then running back, I'm holding a candle burning for a few of these players, Heath. I think that there's a lot of hatred and a lot of dismissal about this class, and I think there's a lack of clarity as to who is the running back 2, who's going to get the necessary day 2 draft capital. I think it could be, I would sort of bet on the over for a lot of the predictions there and the doom and gloom in the community. So it's not last year. It's not as good a class as last year. And certainly if you need a quarterback, you've got to sort of look elsewhere and be able to pivot. But overall, I think I'm ahead of consensus on this class based on the guests that I've had on Dynasty Life, and some really, really sharp people are sort of throwing away this class, Heath. I think that's sort of not the approach right now.
So I think that is really something positive leading into this next question, because I know I've got one team that's like this, and I know there's a lot of teams out there like this that have kind of loaded up on 2026 and 2027 picks. They're going through the rebuild, and now they have several picks in the back half of the first round of this draft. And one of the things that I've felt about is that I agree with you completely when it comes to the top half, maybe even the top 7 of this rookie class, that there really should be no hatred whatsoever. I'm a little bit more concerned about the back half of the first round relative to typical first round rookie pick value. So if you're rebuilding and you have multiple late firsts, are you more likely to try to package those to move up and get one of those top 6? try to move them for 2027 firsts, or to just make the picks?
I think that right now, if you can get into the top 5 overall in Superflex, I think that it's a safer tier to be in. That being said, I think there's a few players that could sort of solidify themselves with what we're going to see this weekend, as well as the actual draft capital. You're risking a little bit, but I do think if you're a Superflex drafter, getting into the top 5 gives you a little bit of safety, even if that means you're sort of sacrificing things to get in there. We're not teaching anybody anything. I think the top 5 right now is pretty clear in the community.
Right.
The 3 wide receivers with Jeremiyah Love and Fernando Mendoza. If I can get myself in position to get one of those guys and not have to give up the farm to do so, I think I'm going to make that move. That being said, there's some intriguing guys that are going to be available in the second. We just have a lack of clarity as to what that order is going to be at. I think we can guess now, but I mean, we can rewind time. We're recording this before the NFL Combine. Heath, I remember a few years back, the Troy Franklin's team.
Yeah.
Everybody had him inside the first round. That year he kind of failed at the Combine, dropped into day 3. So we'll have a little bit more clarity after the Combine. But I do think that there's something to be said for moving into the quote unquote safe tier right now. And then on the flip side, if you're a gambler, those picks behind you are cheap. So if you want to gamble that some guys like Denzel Boston, Casey Concepcion, Kenyon Sadiq are going to land better than expected, you might be able to get 2 of those guys for the price of what will end up being a Jordan Tyson. So there's 2 sides of this coin, and we don't know your roster.
So I'm in a league with Adam Azer, several leagues with Adam Azer, but one of them, I'm kind of a little further along in the rebuild than he is. He's got pick 11 and pick 12, and he offered me those 2 for pick 3, which of course I laughed at. But I also have, I think, 6 or 7 in that draft, and I've been kind of entertaining the idea of would I rather have 2 shots at it at 11, 12 than 6 or 7, and I think that will probably be determined, as you said, by the Combine and by draft capital and how we feel about the 6th and 7th. I kind of feel like we've got this clear top 5. By the time we get to April or May when we're doing rookie drafts, we're probably going to have kind of a third tier of 6, 7, 8 that we mostly agree on and feel a lot better about than we do right now. I like you said, we don't know exactly who those guys are going to be. We're going to speculate in just a couple of moments. I've also seen some good questions in the chat already, and a couple of those we're going to get to at the end of the show like we generally do. One we won't get to that I appreciated from Eli. I can't wait to hear Heath and Theo discuss Drew Aller and Carson Beck. I'm not sure we're going to get to that today, Eli, but there will be a quarterback preview where we'll definitely talk about those guys as we get a little bit closer to the draft. I'm going to change gears on you, and I apologize, Theo. I put 3 questions in for the guest beforehand so they can be ready for them. But what I should have put, I'm going to switch to now. I think it'd be easier for you to answer. As you said, we're recording this in the middle of the Combine, but none of the offensive players have done anything yet. How much should people who are evaluating these prospects let the Combine impact their evaluation of them?
I think that the Combine is a valuable chapter to the book for the players we're learning about throughout the process and we're evaluating. I think to ignore the Combine and to say, I already knew this guy was athletic, I'm not going to double count it, is not the right way to play this game. The Combine, NFL teams have shown a willingness to absolutely double count elite athleticism throughout these last couple of years. A guy like an Anthony Richardson had an unbelievable Combine, and that was reflected by the NFL. Xavier Worthy, we knew he was lightning fast, and the NFL knew he was fast too, but it didn't matter when he broke that record, ended up being a first-round pick. Probably wouldn't have been a first-round selection if he didn't hit that number. So I'm of the opinion that I enjoy the Combine. I think it gives us another data point, and it's trustworthy numbers. A lot of times we hear these unbelievable athletic traits and numbers, and I think a lot of people like looking at the betting markets to see what the betting markets are saying for these guys over-unders in terms of speed. But the Combine actually tells us the truth about it, whether a guy wants to opt out, whether a guy performs well, performs poorly. So I like the Combine. I do think it's a valuable data point, but it's not nearly as valuable to us in Dynasty as what's coming down the road with the draft capital. As good as we've gotten as evaluating these guys before the actual NFL draft, draft capital is another huge statement because it actually shows what the NFL teams think about these players. And dynasty managers are sharper and sharper these days. They understand the hit rates that come with it. So I look at it as we have these guys' entire college careers. Then we get another set of data point with things like the Senior Bowl. Then the Combine's another huge data point. And then we have more data to collect up until the NFL draft. And then it's that 1 week period, Heath, but for most of us, where everything gets turned upside down and we've got to react to the landing spots, the draft capital, and then have our rookie drafts. So that's what makes Dynasty so much fun.
It is absolutely, and we've had some people pushing back over the last couple of months about why you don't want to draft your redraft team until August. Why are you in such a rush to do your rookie draft? And part of it's because we're degenerates and we're so excited and we can't wait any longer. Also because we want to seem like we're bold. And but I do understand, like, some people wait until August to have the rookie drafts. That's fine. This is better than fine. It goes to Mr. Nibbles. I think you had a different name yesterday. Here's a 2026 team name for you, Heath. Immaculate Concepcion. We will talk about KC Concepcion and many other rookies right after this first break.
This is European soccer's biggest stage.
Written in the stars. What a difference she has made.
The question is, can you handle it?
The crowd here feels electric.
Stream every match of the UEFA Women's Champions League on Paramount Plus.
So here's how we're going to do this. I will give Theo the first pick because he's the guest. I'll be the home team and pick second. We'll alternate picks through the first round of the draft, discuss each of these players, and whether or not we agree on the other's placement of them within the rookie draft. This will be for super flex purposes, and we're going to do non-tight end premium just to make it a little bit more difficult to value Sadiq, because I think I know where he would go if it was tight end premium. Let's see where he goes in non-tight end premium. You are on the clock.
Well, this is a layup for me. It's Jeremiyah Love at the 101, no matter what. I don't care about the landing spot. I think he's a special talent at the running back position. I think the NFL is going to draft him maybe even higher than we saw them draft Bijan Robinson, and maybe even higher than we saw Ashton Genty get drafted last year. Jeremiyah Love has everything to his game that we want. And then in modern fantasy football, where high-value touches matter so much, big playability matters so much, he checks off all those boxes. So 3 down back, maybe a future 101 for us in redraft, Heath. Jeremiyah Love off the board at the 101.
Love that pick. I think it will be. Is it as simple as no matter what, or in a super flex league, if you somehow have the 1 pick, but you're actually kind of a contender, and in that same league I referenced, I think that's the case because Adam Azer traded away the 1 pick. But you're kind of a contender, but quarterback is the place where you are really weak. Could you consider taking Mendoza, or is it Love no matter what?
I mean, I've gotten into it with people in previous years where we've sort of flipped the script, and certainly there have been some wins by pivoting to the quarterback versus the positional player. I think people that passed on the Marvin Harrison Jr. will quickly point out maybe I got a Jaden Daniels out of it after Caleb Williams went 101. But for me in this class, the lack of scrambling ability from Fernando Mendoza, and I like Fernando Mendoza, but for me, I don't see him as a player who's a truly elite talent for us in super flex leagues. So I'm going to try to stick to Jeremiyah Love as best as possible. And if I want to pivot down to the 102 level, I'm going to entertain offers to go down there because I think that, again, I don't know your league mates. The 102 manager might really need a quarterback. But I think if I'm going to pivot off of Jeremiyah Love, I don't think the way to do it is just don't take him. I think it's pivot down to the 102.
I agree with that. I will take Mendoza at the 102. And I agree with you on the fact that the rushing is really going to limit the upside. I am getting a little bit more excited about the idea of him coming into this situation where he's at least somewhat mentored by Tom Brady, coached by Clint Kubiak, with Brock Bowers and Ashton Genty, and presumably a new number 1 wide receiver coming in this offseason. This does seem like the type of situation that if Mendoza can be a precision passer who is exceptional at working within the system and to its absolute best, then I think he could be better than Sam Darnold was last year in this situation and continue to grow from that. So I do think that the situation that it looks like Mendoza is going to go into, listen, there's a little bit of an unknown because currently there's no offensive line and currently there's no wide receivers that we really want to get excited about for the Raiders. But with the coach that he's going to be working with and the fact that he has Brock Bowers, I'm a little bit hopeful that Mendoza could maybe sneak into that low end QB1 range in fantasy for an extended period of time. So I will take him at the 102. Would he be your 102 in a vacuum?
I just did this exercise yesterday on Dynasty Life. I did a solo one where I did my top 25 rankings. Yeah. I did tight end premium, and push comes to shove, I don't think I'm there yet with Mendoza. Yeah. I like him a ton. And you get so much insulation drafting a quarterback at the 101, but you get comparisons to guys like Jared Goff, to guys like Matt Ryan. I think the squint and see some Joe Burrow is sort of the dream scenario if he really, really hits. But for me, I'm Carnell Tate. No matter what. I think he's an absolute stud. I know that there's a lot of disagreements in the community right now between who's the wide receiver 1, 2, and 3 in this class. But for me, it's Carnell Tate. I think he's going to fly this weekend. I think he's going to run a 40-yard dash somewhere in like the 4.45 range. To go with the 6'3" size, I think he's a real alpha on the outside. Some positive comparisons would be a guy like George Pickens, but fast-tracked and you don't have to wait for it. I think the dream scenario is he's an A.J. Green type. I think he's really, really good. And I think he's maybe a little bit underrated right now in terms of what he's going to present to us in Dynasty. Huge on Carnell Tate. Really happy to get him here at the 103.
I have Tate at the 103, but to be honest, while I did give you the layup at 101, one of the things I like about giving you the odd numbers is that you had to make the pick of which wide receiver you're going to take first, because I'm not quite as certain as you are about that. Do you think there's any chance that Carnell Tate, with his skill set, ends up in more of a downfield role that is less desirable in full PPR leagues?
I think that there's some scenarios where he goes at the 105 to the New York Giants and has to coexist with Malik Neighbors and a scrambling quarterback in Jackson Dart. But still, we would the glass half full argument would be that he gets top 5 draft capital. So right. I like the Tennessee landing spot at 4. I think that would be great. I would like to see him in Washington with Jaden Daniels. I think that would be great. And I actually think his floor, and I know you'll like this one, with the banner over your shoulder, yeah. I think his floor is 9 to KC, and I think there's not enough people mocking Kansas City to take a wide receiver, but I think that the wide receiver is going to absolutely be in play for Kansas City. So I don't know. I think there's scenarios where Carnell Tate has to be a T. Higgins-esque wide receiver 2, a George Pickens-esque wide receiver 2, but more likely than not, I think teams are viewing him as a wide receiver 1 in their offense. Again, I think he's really, really good and a safe prospect for us in Dynasty as well.
I'm going to go with Mekhi Lemon at pick number 4, wide receiver 2 in the class. I'm starting to feel like there may be, like everyone views it as the clear top 3 wide receivers, and I wouldn't dispute who the top 3 wide receivers are. But I see Tate and Lemon a little bit closer together than either of them is to Jordan Tyson. Now, there's been some talk that Lemon could get kind of cast into this slot-only role. I think he looks like one of these guys that is exactly what the new offenses in the NFL want, which is a guy who can move all over the field and especially excels in pre-snap motion. When you put Tate over Lemon, is that more of an upside argument, a floor argument, or both?
I think that Lemon has the type of profile that's been hitting a lot more at a higher level for fantasy football than maybe the big outside threat like Carnell Tate is. And that's not to diminish Carnell Tate in any way. Right. I love him, but I think he is an outside receiver. I mean, there's aspects to Mekhi Lemon's game that compare quite favorably to a guy like Jackson Smith and Jigba, an Amon-Ra St. Brown. And when you watch him, Heath, he looks like a player that if he lands with a competent offensive coordinator, I think that this is the type of player that early on in his career could command 150 targets, and right. We can't really discount that. So Mekhi Lemon's awesome. I think that there's a lot of sort of people that are a little steamed right now that he's not running the 40, but I don't need to see him run in the 4.4s. I think that that's not necessarily his game. I think there's a lot of nuance to his game. He's never going to be a burner. I think people that were hoping for that might not see it. I do expect again, this is my speculation, it could be a Jackson Smith and Jigba situation where he ends up running the 40 at his pro day as opposed to at the combine, and we get sort of a sigh of relief number where we're not worried about it. But again, I think he's projects to be a big time target earner. I think a lot of the difference between him and Tate is, I think that Mekhi Lemon, if I had to bet on it, I'd say he gets drafted outside of the top 10 overall. I know there's a couple of teams in the back end, like KC, like the New Orleans Saints, that have been speculated to be interested in him. I think he's going to end up somewhere in that 10 to 18 range and 10 to 19 range, which is perfectly fine. That's sort of a little bit of the difference with him and Tate for me as well. So I think it's a fine pick to make.
So if it was a situation where we get to the NFL draft and Lemon is the one that gets drafted first, could you see yourself putting Lemon ahead of Tate?
I'm perfectly willing to look at landing spots. I think they're close enough there in the similar tier.
So the first four in our mock draft: Jeremiyah Love, Fernando Mendoza, Carnell Tate, Mekhi Lemon. That's my first four currently in my rookie rankings. I've not released those yet. We'll get to those probably coming up in March. But I would agree with that top four. What I want to think about, though, if somebody's trying to move from 1 to 4 or maybe from 4 to 1, what the difference is between these first four picks. So let's just start with this. Which side would you be on this one? 104 in 2026 and a 2027 first, or 101 in 2026?
I think that I'm taking the package there because the 2027 draft has so many quarterbacks. Not even to mention one of the best wide receiver prospects we've seen all time. Gives me another sort of bullet that I could end up with that. And 2027 first, if I end up being in a contender throughout the year, Heath, that's going to get me access to a absolute stud who can help me win the championship. So from a game theory perspective, I think that's an appropriate pivot off of the 101.
Okay, let's just let's see how far we can take this. If it's 2027 first and the 108 this year, or 101.
I'd probably try to squeeze out a little bit more at this time than that.
Rather have the 101. Okay, so hard to drop out of that tier because it's not the same thing. We'll talk a little bit more about these picks versus 2027 picks, but you are on the clock. Love, Mendoza, Tate, and Lemon are all gone, and I think everybody in the chat who's been paying attention at all probably knows who you're going to take. Let's see if you can surprise us.
It's an easy one. It's Jordan Tyson, Arizona State. It's locked in. I think he projects to be a wide receiver 1 at the next level. He's another player that I think is going to command targets, and the guy passes the eye test too. I watched his interviews yesterday. Looks big, Heath. He looks like he looks like a guy whose brother was an NBA first-round pick, which he was. 2024, his brother was drafted like 20th overall by the Cleveland Cavaliers, and pretty good NBA player there. So there's some athletic measurables there that I think are going to be positive for Tyson. The one small red flag is the guy's had a number of injuries. I don't think that the NFL teams are going to punish him for those. None of them were overlapping, but we never know until the physicals. And with a lot of times with these physicals, if whispers start to happen, guys can start to fall. But I'm a big Jordan Tyson believer. I think he's a player that, like Tate, projects to be a wide receiver 1 at the next level. He's every bit 6'2". He's only 21 years old. Early entrant as well, which like Tate, like Lemon. And this year, there's fewer early entrants than we're discussing in most years. So if that still matters to you, you're getting that early entrant as well.
Love that. This is the point to where everybody gets really nervous because the top 5 are gone. So I guess before I make my pick, I will just ask you, are you accepting any 2027 first for this pick?
I don't think I'm there yet for the 106. I think the 106 is going to gain steam. Maybe the 107 though.
Okay. I'm going to just stick with the spirit of the feeling of having 106 and take a player that does make me a little bit nervous, but he's huge and he has huge upside. Denzel Boston will be my pick at 106. You talked about, I believe it was Lemon, as the type of wide receiver who has hit more often in recent years. Boston will probably be viewed by a lot of people as the type of guy who has missed more often in recent years at wide receiver, kind of the prototypical early 2000s wide receiver 1, that big guy who can dominate in uncontested catches, but we have questions about how he can separate. I guess first off, would Boston be your pick at 106? And then what's your eval of him as a prospect?
Boston would be my 107 in this process, but I'm right there with you. Brett Whitefield at fantasy points, who's about as good as it gets for film grinding, makes these stylistic comparisons to players. He's mentioned he's got a little bit of CeeDee Lamb to him. So Denzel Boston, even though he's a big outside threat, I do think he's another player in this class that NFL teams are going to view as a future wide receiver one and a player with the ability to absorb a high level of targets at the next level. So I think there's some safety in drafting Denzel Boston if you've got one of these really early rookie drafts, because I do think that when it's all said and done, he's a first-round draft pick and a player that's sort of fast-tracked at the NFL level.
Yeah, the first round part seems to be the consensus view right now. We'll see if anything changes in the next couple of months. And for him, it's probably going to be a situation where landing spot matters a lot to us as opposed to where he's drafted in the second half of round one, right? Like, he looks like the prototypical X, and how the X functions within a specific offense may have a big role in determining how many targets we expect for him.
Yeah, I think so. And I think landing spot's going to matter for Denzel Boston, but there's also some sweet spot landing spots in that back end of the first round where Denzel Boston could land realistically where he would steam way, way, way up. I think sort of starting with the Pittsburgh Steelers, which people might say, that's not so good. But Pittsburgh, I think with Mike McCarthy, I think if Denzel Boston lands there, it might be a year two ascension where he's in a really good spot. We don't know their future quarterback. But if you look at even a little bit further down the draft, if he starts sliding, could we see Buffalo get in the mix to draft him as their wide receiver one? Could we see the New England Patriots? I mean, I hope New England doesn't draft him because of all these dudes are going to make cringy jokes. Boston to New England. I mean, it would be awful. It would be awful, Heath. Just for the sake of our own, not having to deal with that corniness. I hope that doesn't happen. But I think people get excited about him with Drake May. So the second half of the first round has a bunch of landing spots that I think people will really like for Denzel Boston.
All right. So you said Boston would have been your 107. I took him at 106. Who are you taking at 107?
So the player I've sort of flag planted for weeks and weeks, and I think that the community's starting to steam up, is Casey Concepcion, who I think is absolutely electric, can do a lot of the things that Mekhi Lemon can do. Casey Concepcion, I think, has tremendous yak ability. He's a big play threat. He's got an interesting path where he goes from NC State to Texas A&M, was really good for them. And I think he's another player that can end up being a player that absorbs a lot of targets at the next level. Brett Whitefield is even higher on him than I was. So throughout the year, I'm sort of like, Brett, Casey Concepcion, I'm texting him, we're talking on Saturdays, and I tell Brett I think he's sort of like Zay Flowers. Then Brett does his full Casey Concepcion deep dive, and he comes back and he's like, he's going to be way better than Zay Flowers. So we're all in on KC. Brett has him like 11 overall on his big board at fantasy points. So we are well ahead of market consensus on Casey Concepcion over at fantasy points. But you're seeing a lot of people like the Dane Bruglers of the world projecting him to go inside of round one. I think that within a month or two, that's going to be real consensus. Very, very high on KC.
Love that pick. Is he, when you look at Concepcion versus Boston, which one of these guys has a wider range of outcomes in your opinion?
That's a really good one. I think just based on the way that fantasy football has gone recently, I think both of them are good players. I'd be happy to have both of them on my dynasty rosters, and I think they're both going to be first-round draft picks. But I think KC has a little bit more outs. I think he's a player that I think will hit for fantasy football, whereas Boston, if he sort of lands poorly, cast into a wide receiver 2 role, I think he's a little bit more dependent than KC is. I think KC is just an electric player, and I think that yak ability is going to shine.
Okay. Eric in the chat says Sonny Styles needs to play some tight end snaps. And if he did, do you know who he would be? He'd be my number 8 pick. It's Kenyon Sadiq. I think this guy is going to absolutely have the football world in an uproar when he gets through some of his testing. Just an absolute athletic freak. And we've talked about a lot on this show. That may matter at tight end more as much as it does at any offensive position. Really like hearing his confidence in terms of how well the interviews have gone so far with teams and how he seems to be both an extremely athletically gifted player, but also a very cerebral guy and someone that could absolutely be a dominant tight end for a long, long time. I guess when you're looking at Sadiq and you're looking at, we're coming off of what I've called many times the greatest rookie tight end class ever. Where does he fit in the mix with those guys that we just saw have fantastic rookie seasons.
I don't think he's quite where Colston Loveland or Tyler Warren were as prospects, but I do think and I said this, and people get very angry about this one. I think his draft capital is going to be very similar to what we saw with Brock Bowers, Tyler Warren, and Colston Loveland, meaning I think he's a top 15 overall pick in the NFL draft, which is rare, especially for a 21-year-old tight end. Very, very interesting player. A shout out to Bruce Feldman at The Athletic, who writes a great article. I don't know Bruce. I've corresponded with him, but he writes a great article about sort of players that are going to shine at the combine. I think it's tight end day today. Kenyon Sadiq's going to really shine. The weight room numbers are ridiculous. The vertical leap is ridiculous. The broad jump's going to be ridiculous. Sadiq is going to be hyper athletic. I think the way to treat him is he's an immediate tight end 1 for us in our dynasty rankings after his name is called. So you're getting a top 12 player. Does he hit at the same level as one of those guys last year? Maybe not, but I do think that the Sam Laporta rookie season is not completely out of the woodwork. I'd be surprised if he earns 120 targets like Laporta, but I think that he could command 90 plus targets, which is significant for a rookie tight end. The analytical community doesn't like him. I'll say that a lot of Kenyon Sadiq is, if you're big into the analytics, they don't like him. The Ryan Heath has some questions about him, who I work with and I respect. I'm sure Scott Barrett's going to have the same sort of question marks. But at the end of the day, athleticism, draft capital, and the NFL is ripe right now, Heath, where the NFL is valuing younger tight ends more than they have. We've had 3 straight seasons with this. People can cling to their priors if they want, but things change for us in fantasy football, and tight ends are coming in and playing well and playing right away. And if a team drafts Kenyon Sadiq in the top 15, they're not waiting for 2027. They want something this year, and they view him as a player that can help them. So Kenyon Sadiq, I think, is a very strong asset for you.
Yes, yeah, I think you said that extremely well, and we've talked a lot about the film versus metrics, and it's funny because the athletic testing actually turns into a metric, and so I think that will make him look a little bit better in terms of the statistical case for picking him. But that's the top 8: Jeremiyah Love, Fernando Mendoza, Carnell Tate, Mekhi Lemon, Jordan Tyson, Denzel Boston, Casey Concepcion, Kenyon Sadiq, and you are up with pick 9. And I feel like we've reached another breaking point of nobody has any idea what Theo's going to do here.
Yeah, so I'll just flag plant, and I'm sure people are going to hate this one because I think there's a lack of clarity as to who the running back 2 is in this class. But I think Jadarian Price of Notre Dame is electric. I think that he's going to be a high-value touch, big play threat, sort of probably a committee backfield guy, Heath, but a good kind of committee backfield. He's probably somewhere in that 205 to 210 range, and there's a lot of trepidation because he played behind Jeremiyah Love, but we saw it last year with Quinshon Judkins and Trevion Henderson. We saw it a few years back with Javonte Williams and Michael Carter, where they both had strong rookie seasons. And way back in the day, we saw it with Cadillac Williams and Felix Jones. So sometimes there's just this collection of talent in collegiate backfields, and I think it's going to be reflected. Jadarian Price has been ranked pretty high by some of these big board guys. They're not necessarily a fantasy football ranking, but I think a lot of the NFL evaluators are into him. I think if he lands well, I think he has a chance to really help us in fantasy football. So I know it's sacrilege for me to take a running back, and people are going to hate this one, but I'll go Jadarian Price, and I'll mention another running back this early on. And I'll say there's a chance, and I hate this one, but if Ty Simpson ends up being picked like by the New York Jets at 15 overall, that name's in play at the 110, even if we don't like him.
Absolutely. When I was putting together the 14 names, I knew I had to put Ty Simpson on there kind of as a just in case. And so we'll probably get to him in a moment. I'm not going to take him. What I love about the fact that you took Jadarian Price is I think he fits so perfectly in like the way we discuss running backs with the running back I'm going to take. And I actually think that this part of rookie drafts is going to end up being very running back heavy. I think we'll probably see somebody in the chat had asked, and we'll get to it a little later, but they had like pick 11, 12, and 13 and we're running back needy. And I think that's going to be a good spot to just throw 3 darts and probably hit on one. But the guy I'm going to take feels kind of like the complete opposite of Jadarian Price, and it's Emmett Johnson. And the reason I say that is because I think Emmett Johnson is a professional running back. He is going to get what is drawn up by the play. He's going to make some guys miss, but maybe not make an explosive play after that. He's shown an ability to function as a workhorse running back, and he just seems to me like the type of guy that certain coaches, not all of them, but certain coaches fall in love with and keep guys like Price in kind of reserve roles or home run hitter roles. And a guy like a Price is going to have much better efficiency metrics, but Johnson ends up with a lot more touches because he's doing exactly what the coach wants him to do on an every down basis. The one thing Johnson really struggles with is pass protection, which is kind of odd because he had so many catches. But he's shown an ability to function in the passing game as long as he's going out on a route and not left home to block. But I think if he becomes a better blocker, he could be one of those guys that's very annoying to fantasy football managers because he's playing 65% of the snaps on a team where there's another guy that we think's better, but he's kind of like a Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt who doesn't necessarily do everything the way that he's supposed to do, so we don't get to see him as much. So I'll take Emmett Johnson. What's your eval on Emmett Johnson? Is he just the boring running back? But
no, I think that
probably... Yeah,
this is a guy that I think the analytics community is really, really falling in love with. And then you've got some guys like Brett Whitefield, Cody Carpentier, who are more film evaluators and they have a little bit of question marks. But I think from a fantasy football perspective, the production was unbelievable at Nebraska, and he can catch the football out of the backfield.
Right.
So sort of has that 3-down skill set to his game. The problem is he's 200 pounds. So Emmett Johnson, I think draft capital will sort of be their guide. But I'll say that players are smarter and smarter with their decision-making when they're early entrants, Heath, and I think they're getting better information. Emmett Johnson, it's not like he's coming to the NFL to get it fast-tracked 10 years ago.
Right.
He's doing it today where he could have gone back to Nebraska or entered the portal and made a ton of money. So I think that he's a player that probably does sneak into day 2, and I agree with you that by the time we have the NFL draft, I'll take the over on the amount of backs being drafted on day 2 versus a lot of the sort of the running back class haters in the community right now. So I think it's an appropriate pick. I would have him a little bit further down my list, but right now we're in a tier where there's a little bit of a lack of clarity and it's sort of a bigger net of players.
So you are up for pick 11. We have 2 picks left in round 1.
Okay, so pick 11 here. This is sort of a tough one for me. I'm going to go back to the wide receiver well. I'm going to take Omar Cooper from Indiana. Omar Cooper, really, really fun player. He's like 6 feet tall, 200 pounds, incredible yak ability. Really, really a great route runner where he catches everything, has really strong contested catch ability. And I think Omar Cooper, the steam with him, it feels a little bit like Ricky Pearsall a few years ago, where at this time heading into the combine, there was steam for Pearsall, and then it was like a slow drip, and he kept creeping up people's big boards, and then all of a sudden he's a first-round pick. I said this yesterday on a podcast. Actually, I said it on 2 shows. I think there's a chance Omar Cooper ends up being a player that sneaks into the back half of the first round, and it's not like that's a very bold statement. Dane Brugler had him at 27 overall. So throughout the year, I thought it was going to be Elijah Surratt over him, but Cooper just keeps trending up and up and up. So I'm going to follow this team. I'm going to go Omar Cooper, and I think this is about where we're going to be drafting when we get to like that early May rookie drafts. I think Cooper here makes a lot of sense.
I will stay at the wide receiver position and just throw an absolute dart on upside. But Chris Brazzell out of Tennessee, and the first thing I get when I say this is, do you really want to take a guy out of Tennessee? But yeah, I'll take the very large, very fast wide receiver and hope that he ends up in a situation where downfield targets are a little bit more common thing and not where he's just the sacrificial X. But I do think he has the upside to give us one of those spike seasons where maybe it's not sustainable over a 3 or 4 year window, but in the right situation with the right quarterback, I could see this guy really giving us some pop for the cost at 112.
Yeah, Chris Brazzell, it's funny. If we said the words Chris Brazzell, 6'5", 200-pound, fast wide receiver out of Tulane, people would like it more than Chris Brazzell out of Tennessee. And he was at Tulane before and was able to sort of operate in that offense as well. So yeah, I like Chris Brazzell as well. I think he's going to get that top 45 draft capital. Not sure he's a first round pick, but I like this one. All it takes is one, Heath, to sort of end that. We don't want a helmet scout the other way where we're chasing the helmet. Maybe a couple schools we could chase the helmet, but we don't want a helmet scout the other way. So we shouldn't punish him for the sins of Jalen Hyatt.
We're going to go ahead and take our second break. When we come back, we're going to give you 2 second-round picks. So the 2 guys that didn't get drafted that we think will go early in round 2 or maybe even late in round 1. And then we'll answer a few of your chat questions right after this.
This is why we do this every March.
Major slam!
It is a basketball party.
It's March! Expect the unexpected!
We are back. We have finished round 1 of our rookie mock. Jeremiyah Love, Fernando Mendoza, Carnell Tate, Mekhi Lemon, Jordan Tyson, Denzel Boston, Casey Concepcion, Kenyon Sadiq, Jadarian Price, Emmett Johnson, Omar Cooper, and Chris Brazel. You have 1 pick left to make, Theo. I assume there's somebody left in your top 12.
Yeah, Jonah Coleman, Washington, who I have a little bit of concerns about his straight line speed, but I think he projects as a 3-down back at the next level. And like Jadarian Price, I'm going to bet on Jonah Coleman getting the necessary draft capital. I mean, I could throw a couple more names out here, Heath. It sort of stinks to go this short, but I like him a lot. I'll also say if another running back, I hope I'm not say. Are you going running back, Heath?
I'm actually not going. I thought when we got to round 2, one of us was going to take a running back and the other one was going to take Ty Simpson, because if you're doing a rookie draft before the draft and there's a chance Ty Simpson's going in round 1, I think Ty Simpson's going to have to be drafted at least this high, just on the off chance that all of a sudden you found a quarterback at the end of your rookie draft.
Yeah, it seems like there's some anonymous scouts. I think it was Walter Football did an article where a bunch of these scouts are really into Ty Simpson, and there's some steam there for him to go at 13 with the Rams or the Jets a few picks later. So I have huge red flags about the lack of college starts. I think quarterbacks who have a lack of college starts have been guys that have really burned us in Dynasty recently. But Ty Simpson, for better or for worse, in a very down QB class, you'd have to take the shot at the beginning of the second round. The Bo Nix tier for us a few years back. This was the Jackson Dart tier for a lot of us last year. So I get it. I would just wanted to mention, I think Mike Washington of Arkansas, who had a really strong Senior Bowl, is also going to tear up the NFL Combine. So on the record, I think tomorrow, we're recording this on Friday, on Saturday, Mike Washington's got a really, really big day there. So another running back, I wanted to mention his name out.
I'm glad you said it, because he was the one guy when I put my top 14 together for this exercise, he was the one guy who didn't get picked. And I think the one guy who, if the performance at the Combine is as good as we think it's going to be, people are going to see that size, speed, score, and he's all of a sudden going to get, maybe even turn into a round 1 pick in rookie drafts. We did have some great questions from the chat I wanted to get to before, and I'm going to skip one of them because I don't really know what it means. So let's go to the second question. We've got a 10-team super flex league. The guy has Hurts, Daniel Jones, Justin Fields, and Quinn Ewers at quarterback. Is it worth taking Mendoza at 102 or 103? So I guess he has both, or just take the 2 best wide receivers. So really one sure thing at quarterback in Jalen Hurts, and maybe 2 maybes in Jones and Ewers. And I don't know if we have a whole lot of hope for Justin Fields. In that situation, if you have 102 and 103, are you going Tate and Mendoza or Tate and Lemon?
I'm gonna split the difference. I'm gonna take my preferred wide receiver and take Mendoza. Gives me more flexibility down the line. You've also got Quinn Ewers, who will be a Sam Howell type, where gives you a year in Miami before he's replaced next year. Justin Fields, who you're kind of hoping will be in a good backup position where he gives you some possible starts. But I'm going to go Mendoza with whoever your favorite wide receiver is.
100% agree with that. I have the 107 and need a wide receiver. Who should I target, or do I trade away? And if so, who should I try to get? He is a contender. So I think if you look back at the draft we just did, it was it seemed like a pretty big tier break that happened right after the 107. So it's either probably going to be Boston or Concepcion, right?
Yeah, I think if you stay with the pick, both of those guys are good. If not, I'm kicking the tires on some players that we know are good fantasy assets that maybe their managers love rookie picks. Guys like Zay Flowers, I think, would be an interesting pivot at this point. Or maybe the 107, does it get the conversation started for Chris Olave even after last season? Probably get turned down, but maybe you get a counter.
Yeah, you said Zay Flowers. The names that kind of popped into my head were like maybe a Devontae Smith, who could be seeing big increase in value if A.J. Brown is shipped off. But somewhere in that low end wide receiver 2 range, if you want to play it a little bit safer with a vet, especially if you can find somebody who really wants one of these rookies as a contender, the vet probably fits your timeline a little better than the rookies do. Here's the question I referenced earlier. I have the 201, the 202, and the 203 in a 10-team league. Desperately need running backs. So that's in a 10-team league. That's pick 11, 12, and 13. We had running backs sprinkled all around that point in the draft we just did. Would you be willing to take 3 of them there?
I would be willing to do it depending on how the NFL draft goes and the guys get the draft capital that's reflected and the landing spots are okay. I think in a 10-team league, though, where I would probably be looking to package one of those picks or use one of those picks to try to get a veteran running back who could help me right away. You have 3 in a row here. So you might end up kind of drafting the board, which is not always the best way to do so. So I might split the difference here, Heath, use 2 of them on the running backs we talked about and trade one of them for a veteran, or maybe use like the 203 with one of my running backs to sort of try to tier up. A lot of those old running backs are still going to score fantasy points this year, Heath. There's a number of them out there that are in a prime position to help us win in 2026.
So you took in the draft we did Price at the 9th pick. This would be pick 11, 12, and 13. Assuming you don't think Price is going to get to you at 11, do you see a big enough tier between him and the rest of these running backs where you might give up 2 of those picks to get up to 9 to try to get Price?
Depending on the landing spot. I mean, if we're talking about Jadarian Price going at the early 2nd round to Minnesota, to Houston, to New Orleans, sort of those really fun landing spots for one of these running backs and get that top 40 draft capital, then I'm absolutely willing to take the chance on it. But at the end of the day, you could end up with Mike Washington, Jonah Coleman, and Jadarian Price might fall. I think when we get to this actual exercise, the big domino to fall is Ty Simpson.
Yeah.
If Ty Simpson could go, Dane Brugler said it's going between 13 and 53. So the guy's got such a wide range here, but if he does get inside the 1st round, then that's a guy that's going to go around that 108 range in non-tight end premium for some managers. So it's going to sort of push these running backs down into a range that's a little easier for us to take.
We had one more question that we kind of already answered at the start of the show, but I'm not sure Walker heard it. So he has Jaden Daniels, then Daniel Jones and Michael Penix are his only other quarterbacks. At running back, he has Ken Walker, Travion Henderson, Bashal Tutin, Blake Corum's probably a little better running back room than QB room, but we would both still take Love over Mendoza in that situation, but maybe see if you could trade down to get to the 102 and maybe pick up an asset as well. I don't think we had any more questions about the rookies. I did want to finish up today's show because when news happens, we like to react to it. It sounds like George Pickens is going to get the franchise tag, at least initially, with the Dallas Cowboys. I have Pickens as my wide receiver 11 in Dynasty. Does it matter to you at all over the next few months if he stays on that franchise tag, if he's happy with that franchise tag, or if he gets a long-term deal to stay in Dallas?
I think people are kind of sticking to their priors with Pickens, thinking that the sky is going to start to fall because this guy now is going to be upset that he doesn't have long-term stability. The franchise tag is still a tremendous amount of money and sort of validates the season that he just had with Dallas. And they're saying all the right things that they want him for the long term. I ultimately think that he's going to be a Dallas Cowboy for more than the 2026 season, and they're going to sign him. So I'm not really worried about him. And if you're finding any league mates who sort of want to get out of a guy who just got franchise tag, who averaged 18 plus points per game last year, and he's like 24 years old, then I'm willing to have that conversation with them. I think Pickens, where you have him ranked is perfectly fine. Somewhere in that 9, 10, 11 range. He's really, really good, and he's completely locked in. And I think that the market is assuming that the situation will flip this year and CeeDee Lamb's just going to outscore him. Might not happen. Pickens might be here to stay at that like 18-point per game range, which is truly elite for us in fantasy football.
Well, that was the second question I was going to ask about this is like we've had CeeDee Lamb just etched in stone as a top 3 or 4 dynasty wide receiver. He's now down to wide receiver 7 for me. He'll be 27 at the start of this year, so he's still definitely in his prime, but Pickens certainly caps his upside, or did last year. Is it time to just no longer view CeeDee Lamb as a top 5 dynasty wide receiver?
I think he's on the cusp of it. He's in the fringe. I think it's correct to have him ahead of Pickens in the Dynasty rankings. He's just been such an automatic target earner every single year, and I don't think he's going to completely fall off here. You mentioned the age. He's still got a considerable amount of time left to give you such high-end production. So at the end of the year, you might have him back in the top 5, even heading into his 28-year-old season. So for me, I'm perfectly comfortable ranking both these guys inside the top 12. I think they will coexist this year, and nothing really changes with that offense. Javonte Williams was re-signed,
Right.
Dak Prescott there, so that offense is going to score a ton of points, and both those guys are going to have a lot of fantasy points.
I will just say, as somebody who also does seasonal projections, I love it when teams just run it back with everybody in their same roles and the same coach. Makes things much easier on me in figuring out what they're going to do. Maybe the biggest takeaway from all this is go buy Dak Prescott if you're a contender.
Always buy Dak Prescott.
Always buy Dak Prescott. Thank you very much, Theo. Always enjoy talking to you. Appreciate the glimpse you've given us at the rookies. We will certainly talk to you again, hopefully before the NFL draft, to kind of, once we've got these takes a little bit more etched in, probably not stone until the players are actually picked. Remind everybody once again where they can find your work.
Yeah, you can find all my written work, all my rankings over at fantasypoints.com. You can find me in the redraft streets over on Fantasy Football Daily and on Fantasy Points YouTube. Also, School of Scott with Scott Barrett. We're recording actually in about an hour. That's also on Fantasy Points YouTube. The newest venture we have, if you're a Dynasty viewer and listener, go check out Fantasy Points Dynasty YouTube. You're going to find all of my Dynasty content, all of Dynasty Life episodes over there. Also, Ryan Heath, Jacob Sanderson, Thomas Tipple, all of our amazing Dynasty team, and the Dynasty Points podcast as well is exclusively on Fantasy Points Dynasty YouTube. Heath, you've been on Fantasy Points Dynasty YouTube. I know you had a great time, so we'll have you back over there as well, but make sure you check out our new channel.
Dude, go check out everything Theo's talked about, everything they do over at Fantasy Points. Definitely resources that I use as well. Really appreciate the conversation. Thank you to Emma for making everything work. Thank you to everybody who was active in the chat. We will talk to you next Tuesday.